I knew him before he came to the Senate when he was Attorney General here in this state. I had always admired him in the Senate. We stood together on so many issues, sometimes in a small minority. He and I were among the only Democratic senators to support George H.W. Bush's decision to go into Iraq to force Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. And I felt personally some of what Joe came to feel later in his career. We were close on climate, on civil rights, human rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and so many other issues. And so that closeness was formed before I chose him to be my running mate in 2000, but then our relationship and that between our families became extraordinarily close, a very significant relationship. We laughed together, fought like hell together for what we wanted our country to be, prayed together, thought for a season we had won together, but, and, well, you know that part of the story. You win some, you lose some, and then there's that little-known third category. But all of it drew us very, very close together. On Saturdays during the long, excruciating 36-day process after Election Day and before the Supreme Court decision, Joe would walk over to the Vice President's residence at the Naval Observatory to observe the stars, but to observe the Sabbath together, and it was a time of real comfort and perspective. On one occasion, I walked all the way back to his home with him and then back to the observatory. We debated, by the way, the merits of Sabbatarianism, which has had its adherents in my faith tradition in times past and should perhaps be restored. But Joe and I went our separate ways after 2000. I wish I could say this with as much humor as Ned did when you relieved him of that burden of being a Democrat in name. Joe and I had some deep and sometimes bitter disagreements on policy and political matters. No matter how hard I tried or how hard Joe tried, we could not convince the other of the merit of our positions. And those of you who have had arguments with Joe know exactly what I'm talking about. I, for one, was tempted to anger at times, frustrated at Joe's stubbornness and disappointed that he was taking a path that I thought was wrong. And I know his disappointment in my turning away from him was surely just as profound. So there the story could have ended, and if it had, we would have reached a dead end in a once loving and fruitful friendship. But that would have been an unfortunate example of something else as well, something bigger than me or Joe. It would have been a dead end of a kind that is so familiar in the politics of America today. A dead end with ideological cul-de-sacs and ruined possibilities of anger and retreat. But it did not end there. We had another turn. Both of us knew deep down that the strong foundation of our friendship and what we shared in common was so much larger and so much stronger than what was driving us apart in those years. Sooner or later, those of us who are fortunate enough to survive begin to lose precious friendships faster than we can form them. It's why we have to work to recognize their value in the moment. Always preserve them and and if they are temporarily lost, work to reclaim them. Joe had that wisdom.